Hey, this is ADVTRES, and we're headed to the Black Rock Desert. Met up with the Overland bound group out in Pleasanton, and then we made the long drive to the Nevada desert. And after an 8-hour drive, we made it to Gerlach to gas up. One curiosity you don't want to miss is Guru Road. Very cool semi-art installation out there in the middle of nowhere, and you're never sure what you're going to see when you get there. Fully gassed up and ready for an adventure weekend, we made it to the entrance of the Black Rock Desert. There's a lot to explore in the Black Rock desert area, and the history of this area is very vast. Recent history has the immigrants traveling the immigrant trails up to Oregon, and there are markers in the park that denote key areas. This area historically used to be a vast lake and marshland, and at one of these now extinct lakes is the oldest known petroglyphs in North America. And remember, I mentioned lakes. So at one point in history, there was a lake here called Lake Lonaton, which was huge and took up an immense area. And what that means for us is there's immense prehistory and immigrant history in this area. Starting first, our first night camp at Stevens Camp. Stevens Camp is right off of the Applegate Immigrant Trail and was also historically a buckaroo camp. Our second day of venturing, we left Stevens Camp and headed down to Soldier Meadows Hot Springs, and I think recently named Soldiers Meadows due to the U.S. cavalry that were stationed there. Our third night found us down in the Playa of the Black Rock Desert, very near to the Black Rock that the immigrants used to guide their way. Heading out the following day, we got to drive across the Playa, past the Burning Man site, back to Gerlach. The Stevens Camp is right off of the Applegate Immigrant Trail, and I know that there's a lot of denotation of John Fremont founding the route, but I think the route was really based off of Indian trails. Again, people have been living in this area probably since people have been on the North American continent. And Stevenson's camp is a really beautiful vista, a little windy, can be very cold, and there's a cabin on the site with a fireplace, bunk beds, plenty of room to get out of the elements. And based on what I could find out, Stevenson Camp really was a buckaroo camp and a place where the immigrants would rest and feed their animals before heading and continuing on the immigrant trail. And as you can see, there is a pretty good little water crossing into Stevenson Camp, but I think most 4x4 vehicles shouldn't have a problem. And if the cabin's occupied, be prepared for high winds and cold. If you're unable to find a campsite, either at the cabin or outside the cabin, if you continue to the west a little ways, there is a beautiful canyon with about 3 or 4 campsites, dispersed campsites available that are along a very shallow creek. This area is great to explore. You're right off the Applegate Trail. There's tons of obsidian and other interesting stones and geology to look at. And the canyon itself is filled with some beautiful biodiversity. And if you're lucky enough that the Stevens cabin is available, it's set up really nice inside, and we met a group of ex-Terra explorers and got to enjoy an evening out of the elements with them. The following day, after everyone breakfast and packed up their campsites, we headed out of Stevenson Camp into the High Rock Canyon area. Over 17 million years ago, this area was full of volcanic activity, and lava flowed across much of Nevada. And over millions of years, these flows were then faulted and uplifted to form the Black Rock Range and the Tablelands. The presence of human activity in this area is recorded in the High Rock Canyon walls. Prehistoric man left rock shelters, campsites, and petroglyphs in this vastly remote volcanic area. And it was the northern Paiute Indians that met with John C. Fremont and showed them their ancestral trails that helped the immigrants get to California goldfields and up to Oregon. As overlanders, there are things to be aware of in this area. One, it's remote. I mean, think remote and then think even remoter. There's no cell service, and on our trip, especially coming from Stevenson Canyon, I think we only saw 2 other vehicles. The one surprising thing about this area is there is water. So if you do have some type of water filtration system, you will be able to get water. And there is lots of sharp volcanic stone, so ensure that your vehicle has good tires. Think Death Valley when you're going out in an area like this. Now we were leaving Stevens Camp and heading to Soldier Meadows, and there were, I would say, maybe 3 or 4 water crossings that we had to go through. Just note that if there have been periods of heavy rain, these water crossings might not be passable. And if you're lucky, you just might be able to spot the pronghorn antelope that are known to roam these ranges. One of the sites that we stopped to take a look at was the Fox Homestead. The Fox Homestead is an old ranching homestead that's located near the Yellow Rock Canyon. And the Yellow Rock is created due to sulfur springs that were active in the area. And if you're out hiking around exploring, you may be lucky enough to stumble across other homesteading sites that were in this area, as there were several ranch homesteads located in these canyons. The Foxes and other homesteaders that were in this area were eventually evicted when their land was purchased by a larger livestock company. Leaving the Fox Homestead, continuing south towards Soldier Meadows, one of the areas that we were going to stop and look at was the Post Office Cave. And on the way there, again, there are several more water crossings to go through. But the scenery is beautiful. And near the Post Office Cave, there's actually a small lake that you can explore. And while the Post Office Caves are interesting from an immigrant history, I'm sure they were also used by early peoples for shelter. At the Post Office Cave, there is also graffiti from early immigrants traveling through the area. And this is also a good place to have lunch and change a damaged tire. Exiting High Rock Canyon by route of Fly Canyon, we then entered into the Soldiers Meadow area where we were going to camp for the night. Soldiers Meadow is a site of some hot springs, which you can kind of see here. There are several what I'll call soaking pools along the seep of this hot spring. And gentle hike, you'll be able to find one that you really enjoy. As you come into Soldiers Meadow, it opens up to kind of a vast flat area that was an ancient volcanic caldera, and there's tons of lava, stone, lava rock, and other types of rock in this area. The early immigrants would use this area as a place to let their cattle and horses graze and to rest before they continued the rest of the journey down the Applegate Trail. The campsite itself has 15 available sites and also a pit toilet. And being out in this scenery at this time of year, this was mid-May, it really feels like some of the video I've seen of Mongolia out in the high steeps, and truly, truly beautiful. After exploring the area, taking a hot spring dip, we had dinner. Several of us enjoyed the hot springs a second time, and then admired the beautiful sunset. The next day, we packed up and headed out, heading towards the Playa, and one of the places we stopped at was the murder site. This site is the site that's attributed to the site where Peter Lassen and Edward Clapper were killed while out prospecting for silver. Lassen was very familiar with this area, having worked it about 20 years before in establishing the Lassen Emigrant Shortcut. It's conjectured that Peter Lassen, also from Lassen National Forest, was shot and killed by Paiute Indians in the area. Though there is some discrepancy about this, as the men were looking for a very profitable silver mine, and the only man that survived, Wyatt, could have possibly done the deed. From here, we headed out across the desert, looking for a campground on the Playa. We were planning on camping at the Black Rock Hot Springs, but this area was completely full, and so with a little bit of exploring, we were able to find a playa that we pretty much had all to ourselves. That afternoon, I spent the day kind of exploring around the playa, and it's really interesting the things that you can come across. I think what I came across was an old, potentially immigrant grave. And also one of the other things I stumbled across was some World War II artillery ammunition, just kind of lying out there in the middle of nowhere. The other thing about the playas are they are extremely beautiful. You can come across hoof prints of horses, rocks that show the kind of movement across the ground, and the vistas are just inspiring. That evening, we had a wonderful campfire and told many good stories around the fire as the evening waned on. The next day, we woke up, had a good breakfast, and packed up our camps, got everything organized, and headed out back across the playa to head home. Now, leaving from Black Rock out to the playa, it's a pretty doable drive. There are some whoops, so you do need to watch your speed a little bit. But once you get out into the playa, and again, several land speed records have been made out here, and a few of our group really wanted to, play and have fun with their rigs, which was, a lot of fun to watch and participate in. And the playa is truly beautiful. And when you're driving across the playa, so we were at Black Rock and then heading across the playa towards the Burning Man site and then out to Garlock. When you kind of get in the middle zone of the playa, it becomes, it's hard to judge distances. It's hard to, if you're with a group of other people, it's hard to see where they're at because the visuals are distorted. And it's really kind of a surreal experience. Do be careful though driving on the playa. There are areas of dips and soft sand, but otherwise, have a lot of fun out there and really enjoy the staggering beauty. The other nice thing while being out here in May was the wildflowers were in bloom. So please tread softly when you're out exploring these areas, as these beautiful flowers are easily crushed underfoot. This is ADVTRES out, and I hope to see you down the trail. And if you see me and Alice out there, please feel free to stop by and say hi.